All right, hello everybody. So this is now an extension of what you learned the last lesson. So the last lesson you learned the properties. You learned what expanding and condensing means, and you learned the different operations to go with each one. The lesson before that, you learned how to solve the equations. I'm just going to quickly recap. If you remember, when we did the equations, you had one equation where it just had a single log, so you had to rewrite it. The other equation, you had a log on either side, so then you just canceled them out and then solved. So what you want to do is you want to turn these equations into one of those two types of equations. And by doing that, you're going to use the properties. So you'll see this is an extension of yesterday's lesson. You'll notice it says example 3. Typically, we would have done this in one day, but because of our circumstances, I've split it into 2. So we're going to kind of walk through the examples, and if you have questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. So the first one, you're going to see you have two logs that are being added together. Well, you guys learned yesterday that to condense them, addition turns into multiplication, and it becomes a single log. So this is going to become log base 6, and then I'm going to end up taking what's inside and multiplying it. If you want to go ahead and distribute, you can. You will have to eventually, but if I just left it as is right now so you can see that it was multiplication. Now I have the type of equation that I had 2 lessons ago. I have a single log, so in order to solve it, I'm going to rewrite it. Now this is something that some people were making mistakes on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite it. So I'm going to drop it down, and I'm actually going to distribute it this step. X squared minus 9x, bring down the equal sign. Now, what goes on the other side? Remember, you have to take into account this base. So it's going to go 6 to the second power on the other side. Well, 6 to the second power is the same thing as 36. Some people were just bringing down that number and not factoring in the base at all. So just make sure you always go base to power on the other side. Now I have a problem to where I'm going to end up to have to factor. So x squared minus 9x minus 36 equals 0. I'm going to factor x minus 12, x plus 3 equals 0, which then x equals 12 or negative 3. Now, you have to check. Again, things you cannot take the log of. 1, the base can't be negative or 0. 2, what you're taking the log of can't be negative or 0. Okay, because I know some people, for that one question on the past homework assignment, it was extraneous because when you plugged it in, it made log of 0, which you cannot do. So we need to make sure we always double check. So I'm going to plug 12 in for both x's. It works out perfectly fine. But if I put negative 3 in for either x, you end up taking the log of a negative number. So that means this one is out. So the answer is just x equals 12. So now we're going to do the same type of problem. You'll see we have 2 logs on one side. So I'm going to condense for the second problem. And it's subtraction, so that means I'm going to condense using division. So it's going to be log base 5. Now I'm going to write a fraction equals 1. Again, now that it's a single log, I'm going to rewrite it. So I'm going to drop it down, drop down the equal sign, base to power on the other side. 5 to the first power is the same thing as just 5. Now that I have a fraction involved and I'm trying to solve for x, I'm actually just going to do cross multiplication. So I have negative x minus 1 equals 50. Add the 1, negative x equals 51, which means x equals negative 51. Now remember, there's nothing wrong with x being negative. It's just once you plug it in, it can't make a negative. So let's check it. If I plug negative 51 right here, you would get negative of negative 51 minus 1. Double negative cancels, which means you end up with 50, which is perfectly fine. And you can even check it using your calculator. Use that option of it coming out to be true or false in your TI Nspire, and you can check it that way since we're solving equations. So then we know x equals negative 51 is valid. Now we're going to move on to the second type. So you'll see in part C, we now have multiple logs. We have 2 logs on one side and 1 log on the other. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the one side on the left and we're going to condense what we know by using the properties. We have subtraction, so it's going to turn into division. Let me fix that. So again, sorry. 48 over x. Bring down the equal sign. The other side is going to stay as is. But now we have the type of equation where I have a log base 4 on one side and a log base 4 on the other. They cancel each other out. So now I have 48 over x equals 6. Cross multiply if you need to, or if you can just figure out that x equals 8. Again, double check. If you plug 8 in for x, it works out perfectly fine. So my answer is x equals 8. All right, last example, applying the properties. So you'll see we have a couple things we can do here. If you look on this left side, I have a front 2. Whenever we have a front number, I'm going to bring that in and it's going to become the exponent. So it's going to end up becoming log base 7 of x squared. Bring down the equal sign. I'm going to condense the right side. Addition turns into multiplication. So it's going to end up being log base 7 of 81. Same log on both sides, get rid of them. X squared equals 81. I can solve by factoring or by square rooting. Completely up to you. I'm going to square root both sides. X equals plus or minus 9. Now, whenever you check, you always want to go back to the original. If I put in a positive 9 for this x, it'll be fine. But if I put a negative 9 in for that x, it's extraneous. So my final answer is just x equals 9. So that is how you solve equations applying the properties that you learned last lesson. Again, they're not too difficult. There's usually not too many condensing steps like there were in the problems you saw yesterday. But now you're going to see a couple examples that do appear on the SAT on the no calculator section. So how you can apply these properties on the no calculator section. So just take a look at that and then that'll be it for today. Okay, so this is just something a little extra just to show you problems of how you may see this on state tests such as the SAT. So a type of example that you might see, you might be given some log information, because notice it's no calculator, and then you're going to be given a problem. You have to use what you know about the properties to be able to use the logs that are given to figure out what the answer is. So for example, if you take a look at the first one, we have log base 6 of 15. Well, we're given log base 6 of 3 and log base 6 of 5. So you have to manipulate those numbers and figure out, well, how can I get a 15? Well, you can get a 15 if you do log base 6 of 3 times 5. Well, you guys learn the properties, and when you multiply, it expands to be addition. So log base 6 of 3 plus log base 6 of 5, which means then you just end up adding those decimal equivalents, 0.61 plus 0.90, and you get 1.51. You've now figured out the answer without a calculator. So try another one. Log base 6 of 9. You can do this a couple different ways. How can I use what I'm given to be able to manipulate to get 9? You can do 3 squared or 3 times 3. Either one of them would work perfectly fine. Let's do 3 squared since we haven't seen one with an exponent yet. So if I change this to be log base 6 of 3 squared, the property is bring that exponent to the outside. So it ends up being 2 times log base 6 of 3. Well, log base 6 of 3 is 0.61. 2 times 0.61 is 1.22. So you've now figured out the decimal equivalent without using any sort of calculator. Part C, we have division. So as you guys know, division expands into subtraction. So log base 6 of 5 minus log base 6 of 3. So then we would do 0.90 minus 0.61, which then that answer is 0.29. We might need to practice our adding and subtracting of decimals and multiplying of decimals. All right, last example, log base 6 of 75. So there's a couple different ways of how you can manipulate the numbers to get 75. So for example, I can do 3 times 5 times 5. I can do 3 times 5 squared. So we've got multiple operations happening. Either way you decide to go about it, you will end up getting the same answer. So I'm just going to do this first one. So if I do log base 6 of 3 times 5 times 5, it ends up being log base 6 of 3 plus log base 6 of 5 plus log base 6 of 5. So 0.61 plus 0.90 plus 0.90, which would then give you an answer of 2.41. And that's how you manipulate the given to be able to find out a logarithm without a calculator, knowing the properties. So that was just kind of a little bit of an added extra. I usually do that every year just because it's usually right around the time SATs happen. But of course, given the circumstances, who knows when that is going to be happening again. So you're going to have some practice problems, trying to take it slow. If you have any questions, let me know. Next lesson is just a review. So you're not learning anything new next lesson. So just stick with me for one more day. Okay. All right. I'll see you next time. Have a good afternoon. Enjoy the beautiful weather.